At 11:42 p.m., Victor Sarto's men poured gasoline across the sidewalk outside Elena Marlowe's flower shop while she stood behind the shattered window, accused of hiding coded messages inside Luca Moretti's deliveries. Victor gave the full-figured florist 18 minutes to confess or watch the business her mother built disappear in flames. Even Luca, the cold mafia boss who had quietly protected her neighborhood, could not explain why Victor's private seal appeared on an order written in Elena handwriting. But Elena saw one impossible detail. The flowers listed on that order could not have been purchased anywhere in the city that week. With gasoline creeping beneath her door, she created a single bouquet and asked Victor's youngest soldier to deliver it before midnight. When Victor's men saw the arrangement, 3 lowered their weapons, one whispered the name of a man Victor claimed had betrayed them, and another locked the mansion gates from the inside. Elena had not sent flowers of surrender. She had sent a question Victor could not survive answering. 36 hours earlier, Elena Marlowe stood on a ladder beneath the awning of Marlowe flowers, fastening lemon leaves around a cracked brass hook. Thursday rain left the old market shining. At 29, Elena had a youthful round face, chestnut curls pinned high, and a full, voluptuous figure beneath her green wrap dress and apron. She moved carefully because her mother taught that haste broke stems and ankles with equal indifference. The black sedan stopped without touching the curb. Luca Moretti stepped out before his driver could open the door. He was 32, broad-shouldered and controlled, his black hair swept back from a severe face. An open collar revealed black and grey ink climbing his neck. More tattoos crossed his hands when he steadied Elena's ladder with one palm. "I had it," she said. "The hook is loose. So is your understanding of personal space." His eyes lifted to hers. Luca rarely smiled, but a faint warmth disturbed the cold stillness in them. Thursday camellias. Every Thursday for 11 months, he bought 6 white camellias for his Aunt Sophia, who had raised him. Elena never asked why he trusted no one else to choose them. She climbed down. Her assistant, Nina Caldwell, wrapped daisies for the community clinic, while Thomas Vega, Elena's delivery driver, checked the old refrigerator. Elena selected the camellias from the second shelf. "These opened this morning. Keep them away from the heater in your car." Luca placed cash on the counter. "Too much as always," she returned half. "This is a flower shop, not a laundering operation." Nina stopped tying ribbon. Thomas became fascinated by the refrigerator gauge. Luca accepted the money without offense. "You still send the unsold arrangements to St. Anne's Clinic on Fridays?" They not unsold, they reassigned. Months earlier, Elena had confronted Luca after one of his men collected protection money from clinic vendors. The collector vanished from the route and the money returned without a note. The front bell rang again. Victor Sarto entered with 2 men in grey coats. He was in his late 40s, compact and immaculate, with silver at his temples and an amber signet ring on his right hand. He looked at the shop as if calculating how quickly it could be emptied. "Miss Marlowe," he said, "I've sent 3 offers for this building, and I've declined all 3. Your mother had sentimental instincts. You inherited them." Elena's hand tightened around the shears at her apron. "You didn't know my mother?" Victor's gaze moved to Luca. "I didn't expect Moretti to be choosing flowers during a territorial dispute." "Then your intelligence is poorer than your manners," Luca said. The air changed. Nina quietly moved toward the back room. Thomas closed the refrigerator and stood beside her. Victor laid a cream envelope on the counter. A red wax seal bore the Sarto crest. Inside was a purchase contract offering half the building's value and requiring Elena to vacate within 48 hours. "The old market corridor changes hands at midnight tomorrow," Victor said. "The council will recognize whichever family controls uninterrupted passage from Mercer Street to the river warehouses. Your property is the last break in that line." Elena finally understood why his offers had arrived so quickly. Her narrow building opened onto Mercer Street, but its rear loading yard connected to Bell Alley, the only truck route that bypassed a city construction closure. The flower shop was not valuable to Victor for its rooms. It was valuable because delivery vans had crossed its yard for 30 years. "My answer is no." Victor's attention rested on her apron, her shop, and the old photograph of Elena's mother above the register. Buildings are fragile things. Luca moved once, placing himself half a step closer to Elena. He did not touch a weapon. He did not need to. Victor raised a placating hand, a business observation. Nothing more than observe the door, Elena said. For a moment nobody breathed. Victor's smile arrived without warmth. He collected the unsigned contract but left the sealed envelope. After the Sarto men departed, Luca turned to Elena. Close the shop. Take Nina and Thomas somewhere safe if I close. Victor gets the corridor without buying it. If you stay, he may take more than the building. And if I run whenever a man threatens what belongs to me, it never belonged to me. Danger made Luca reduce people to pieces he could move, yet he did not order her. He wrote a number on a plain card. This reaches me directly, he said. No secretary, no captain. If anything changes, call. Elena looked at the number. Does accepting it put me under your protection? No. His gaze held hers. It puts me under your instruction. He left with the camellias. At 4 that afternoon, a courier delivered a handwritten order for 12 arrangements to be collected. Friday evening, the slanted letters looked exactly like Elena's. The bottom of the page carried Victor Sarto's red seal. She had never written it. Elena locked the false order in her steel cash box and photographed it. It specified 12 arrangements of blue irises, white ranunculus, and red gladiolus, collected Friday night for 12 Sarto captains. Nina read over her shoulder. Someone copied your handwriting. Not copied. Practiced. Elena pointed to the capital M in Marlowe. Mine closes at the top. This one leaves a gap. Thomas leaned against the office door. Call Luca. Elena picked up the card he had given her, then set it down. A forged order with Victor's authentic-looking seal could be bait designed to make her run directly to Moretti. Calling Luca without knowing what the order meant might place him where Victor wanted him. That was her first mistake. She chose to investigate. Alone she called 3 wholesalers. The first had no blue irises because a mold inspection had shut down the regional greenhouse. The second had destroyed its stock on Tuesday. The third, Faro Floral Exchange, confirmed that no legal shipment had entered the city since Monday. Someone might have old stems in a private cooler, Nina said. After 4 days, the tips would soften. The order calls for presentation quality flowers tomorrow night. Elena studied the page. Whoever wrote this knows what blue irises mean to the Sartos, but not where flowers come from. The Sartos had used flowers as signals for years. Blue iris meant loyalty under pressure. White ranunculus honor restored, and red gladiolus a challenge accepted. Together, they declared a disputed oath settled. They preparing to recognize Victor's claim to the corridor, she said. At 6, Luca returned without his driver. Rain darkened the shoulders of his midnight blue coat. He looked at the empty place beneath the counter where the cash box normally sat. Something changed. Elena disliked how easily he read her shop. A courier brought an order. She showed him the photograph, not the original. Luca's expression remained cold, but a pulse moved once at his jaw when he saw Victor's seal. Why didn't you call? Because the last line on the order says collection begins after your council delegation leaves Mercer Street. It might have been written to send you here. You decided that alone. It is my name on the page and my captains listed beneath it. Their conflict was trust. Luca believed protection required control. Elena believed help without consent became another form of seizure. He read her wholesaler notes. Can the flowers be obtained outside the city? Not fresh enough by tomorrow, unless someone reserved them before the quarantine. Victor may have then. Why forge an order from me? Luca had no answer. He walked to the window and watched the wet street. My council meets tomorrow at 10. If Victor proves an uninterrupted access to the river and enough captains recognize his route, the neutral families will award him Mercer. He'll use it to move weapons through the old market. There are apartments over every shop. He considers that useful cover. Elena remembered Luca returning the clinic vendor's money. And you? I move contraband through industrial roads, never narcotics, never beneath homes. She believed that boundary because she had seen him enforce it at cost to his own income. Belief did not make him innocent. It made his danger more complicated. They agreed Elena would fill a legitimate council order, while Luca placed 2 men outside. Thomas would avoid Bell Alley, and Nina would stay with her sister. At 9 Friday morning, every one of Elena's suppliers cancelled. At noon, a city inspector arrived on an anonymous complaint and found nothing. At 3, a brick broke the front window. Tied around it was a backward-folded strip of cream ribbon, the same ribbon Elena used on Moretti orders. Luca arrived 6 minutes later. He saw the glass around Elena's shoes and went very still. "Victor wants you to think I called you," she said before he could speak. Did. "I know my men saw the car together. They boarded the window." Luca held the plywood while Elena drove screws through it. His forearm tattoos disappeared beneath rolled sleeves dusted with sawdust. When her drill slipped, his hand closed around hers, not possessive, simply steady. "You could still leave," he said quietly. "So could you? Not anymore." She understood he was not talking about the corridor. At 8:45 Friday night, Thomas failed to return from a routine clinic delivery. His van appeared 10 minutes later at the end of Mercer Street, driven by a Sarto soldier. Victor stepped out behind it, holding the original forged order Elena had locked in her cash box. Victor's possession of the forged order meant someone had entered Elena's locked office and opened the cash box. The rear door remained bolted. Only Nina, Thomas, and Elena had office keys. But contractors had passed through during the inspection. Outside, Sarto men closed both ends of Mercer Street. 2 rolled gasoline cans from Thomas' van. Victor held a portable loudspeaker in one hand and the cream order in the other. "Elena Marlowe," his voice carried through the rain. "You have been conducting private communications for Luca Moretti under the protection of a neutral business. Come outside with the records, and your driver goes home." Thomas was pushed from the van, his hands were bound, and blood marked one side of his mouth, but he walked without help. Luca stood in the dark doorway of the bakery across the street with 4 men behind him. He could open fire, but Victor had placed civilians at the upstairs windows by choosing the market as his stage. Any exchange would cross apartments. Elena called Luca's direct number. He answered without looking down. "Tell me what you need. Time. No shooting. He has Thomas, and he wants you to make this a battlefield." Silence. Then Luca said, 18 minutes. After that, the gasoline reaches the basement vents. Victor had calculated correctly. The street sloped toward Elena's door. Once poured, fuel would run beneath the old threshold and into the floor grates. At 11:42 p.m., his men tipped the cans. Gasoline spread across the sidewalk in silver streams. Victor raised the forged page so nearby shopkeepers could see Elena handwriting and his seal. He claimed the order proved she had hidden messages in Luca's deliveries and used Sarto symbols to corrupt his captains. Even Luca could not explain how Victor's seal had reached Elena's locked cash box. He stayed across the street because she had asked him to, his cold face lit by the red reflection of brake lights. Elena looked at the false list again through the window. Blue irises, white ranunculus, red gladiolus, flowers no legitimate seller could assemble fresh that week. Then she understood what the forger had missed. Each captain had entered through a different sponsor, honored by a distinct flower at Don Enzo's retirement banquet. Elena's mother had designed it, and her order book remained above the cooler. Victor was pretending one arrangement could command all 12 men. Elena could answer, with a bouquet that reminded them their loyalties had existed before him. She climbed onto a stool and pulled down her mother's ledger, dust lifted from the cover. On page 87 were 12 names and 12 flowers: rosemary for Carlo Dane, burgundy dahlia for Samuel Price, yellow freesia for Owen Bell, and 9 others, including a single white anemone for Marco Sarto, Victor's nephew, whom Victor had denounced as a traitor after the young man vanished 8 months earlier. Elena had no blue irises. She did not need them. She chose one stem for each captain and clipped the ends at her mother's oath angle. Around the white anemone, she left a gap where a sponsor's seal belonged. Nina's voice came from the back stair. She had ignored Elena's order to stay away and entered through the apartment roof from the neighboring building. "You were going to get yourself killed," Elena whispered. "Thomas taught me the roof route. What do you need?" The youngest man outside, grey coat, no ring. He keeps looking at Thomas. Nina opened the delivery hatch. The soldier approached when she waved a white cloth. His name was Rafe Colton, 22, a recent recruit Elena recognized because he bought sunflowers for his younger sister every payday. Elena held out the bouquet. Take this to the Sarto captains at the Mercer mansion before midnight. Tell them Victor says it completes the oath." Rafe stared at the arrangement. "He didn't say that. Then ask yourself why he forged an order that does." He looked toward Victor, then toward the bound driver. "If I leave, he'll hurt him. Luca will move when you reach the corner. Thomas will have one opening." Elena called Luca and described the plan. He hated it. She heard the refusal forming in his breath. "You said you were under my instruction," she reminded him. "That was before gasoline. Your word changes when it becomes expensive?" His answer came after one hard second. "No." Rafe took the bouquet and walked north. Lucas' men cut the streetlights at the corner, not through hacking, but by opening a maintenance switch the bakery owner had used during electrical repairs. In the brief darkness, Thomas threw himself behind the van. Luca crossed the street, dragged him into cover, and took a bullet through the outside of his left upper arm. The shot did not shatter bone, but it spun him against the curb. Elena ran outside only far enough to pull Thomas through her doorway. Nina slammed it behind them. Luca returned to the bakery under his own power, one hand clamped over the wound. At the Mercer mansion, Rafe carried the bouquet into the front hall. 3 captains lowered their weapons. "Carlo Dani," whispered Marco Sarto's name. Owen Bell saw the unsealed anemone and locked the gates against Victor's reinforcements. Elena had not proved who forged the order. She had exposed the question Victor feared. If Marco had truly betrayed the family, why had Victor erased the oath that gave Marco authority to challenge him? At 11:58, Victor received the call. His smile vanished. At midnight, he struck a match. The flame touched the gasoline and raced blue-orange across the pavement. Elena pulled Nina and Thomas toward the rear stairs as heat struck the boarded window. The plywood caught at its lower edge. Glass burst inward from the unboarded side panel, scattering over the display floor. Thomas stumbled, dizzy from the blow he had taken, and Elena hooked his arm over her shoulders. She could support him for several steps, but not carry him. Nina took his other side. "Roof," Elena said. "The alley is blocked." Smoke folded along the ceiling. The fire had not yet entered the cooler, but it climbed the front curtains and licked across the dry, decorative vines above the counter. Elena grabbed the small office fire extinguisher and cleared a path to the stairwell. She did not try to save the shop. Her mother had taught her to protect living things first. Across the street, Luca saw the upper apartment window open. He ordered his men to hold their fire and went through the bakery despite the blood soaking his sleeve. The baker, Mrs. Alvarez, led him up a narrow service stair to the connected roofs. Elena emerged into cold rain with Nina and Thomas. Luca met them at the parapet. His face remained controlled, but his eyes moved over Elena with a precision that felt more intimate than an embrace. Hair singed at one curl, soot on her cheek, no visible burns, both hands moving. "You re-hit," she said, "through the muscle. That is still hit. Can Thomas cross?" The question mattered. Luca did not reach for Elena first, or pretend his wound erased everyone else. Together, they moved Thomas over a maintenance bridge into the bakery roof access. Fire engines were already turning onto Mercer Street. Mrs. Alvarez had triggered the Market S old alarm and called the station before the match fell. Victor withdrew when sirens approached. The captains locked inside the Mercer mansion refused his order to open the gates, leaving him with only 7 street soldiers and no reinforcements. He could not stay without being found beside gasoline cans and a burning civilian business by 12:19 a.m. Paramedics had treated Thomas for a concussion and Luca for a clean gunshot through the outer left arm. Luca refused hospital transport only after the medic confirmed no bone, artery, or nerve appeared damaged. His arm was irrigated, bandaged, and placed in a sling. He could walk and use his right hand, but the left would remain weak and painful. Firefighters contained the blaze to the storefront and front apartment room, but water ruined the walls, wiring, stock, and most flowers. Elena watched black water flow from her mother's business. Luca came beside her. "I should have moved before he lit it. You moved when I asked, and he burned your shop. Victor burned it." Elena turned to him. "Do not steal his guilt, because you prefer guilt to helplessness that landed harder than accusation." Luca had spent his life converting fear into authority. Elena saw the moment he considered denying it, and the rarer moment he chose honesty. "I was helpless," he said, "for 8 minutes. Learn from them." At 12:37, Rafe called Elena from the Mercer mansion. The captains wanted to know why Marco's flower had been left unsealed, because Victor's forged order declared an oath settled without naming the man entitled to challenge it. Elena said, "I want to know where Marco is." Rafe hesitated. "I delivered food to someone at Sarto River Warehouse 3 last week. Nobody told me his name. He wore Marco's ring." Luca heard the call on speaker. "Marco is alive." "Maybe," Elena said. Rafe saw a ring. Carlo Dane took the phone. He had served the Sartos for 23 years. "The council cannot award permanent passage without the recognized heir's assent, or proof of his death," Victor said. "Marco renounced the family 8 months ago and sent his ring back." Victor needed the old market corridor, but Marco's living claim blocked him. He had hidden Marco and forged an oath to present the captain's compliance as consent. "The council suspended tonight's ruling after the fire," Carlo said. "They reconvene at noon Saturday. Victor has 12 hours. Luca's instinct was immediate. We take the warehouse now." Elena looked at his sling, Thomas on a stretcher, and the ruined shop. "Victor expects that. He expects me to protect territory. Then we make him deal with a florist." They relocated to Faro Floral Exchange, a wholesale greenhouse complex 6 miles west. Its owner, Helen Faro, had known Elena's mother and opened the locked packing house without question. Nina went with Thomas to the hospital. 4 Moretti guards secured the loading doors, while Luca's physician replaced the temporary dressing and ordered him not to lift, fire a weapon with his left hand, or reopen the wound. At 2, Elena spread photographs of the forged order beside her mother's ledger. Luca sat across from her in a borrowed black shirt, the left sleeve cut loose around his bandage. "What can flowers tell us that Rafe cannot?" Where Victor planned to get impossible irises, she enlarged the photograph. Near the red seal lay a faint crescent of yellow dust. "Pollen?" Luca asked. "Maybe your packing powder. I need the original page." "Victor has it." Elena met his gaze. "Then we need someone he still trusts." At 2:26 a.m., Elena called Owen Bell inside the locked Mercer mansion. She did not ask him to betray Victor. She asked him to inspect the bouquet. "The stems were cut fresh," she told him. "The binding is from my shop. Inside the hollow handle is a copy of my mother's original banquet list. Compare the sponsors to the captain's Victor placed on his forged order." Owen found the mismatch immediately. Victor's page assigned all 12 men to himself. Enzo Sarto original list showed authority distributed among 6 sponsors, including Marco's late father. The forged arrangement was not merely a signal of peace. It was an attempt to rewrite the chain of loyalty. "Victor's returning to the mansion at dawn," Owen said. "He'll bring men from the river. Can you get the original order from him?" "Not without showing my hand." Luca leaned toward the phone. "Then keep your hand. We need Marco alive more than we need paper." The forged page could clear Elena and preserve Luca's claim. Rescuing Marco restored a rival. Elena watched him choose a life over an easier victory, and something inside her shifted. Rafe supplied the warehouse routine. A food van arrived at 4:10 a.m. The east loading door opened for 90 seconds. 2 guards changed at 4:15. Elena knew the company. Bell Street Diner made the deliveries, and its owner confirmed the schedule had been unchanged for months. "We use the van," Luca said. "Victor knows Rafe left the street," Elena replied. "He may assume he talked. We cannot wait until noon." Elena agreed against the quiet warning in her own mind. The delivery routine was ordinary, established, and verified by the diner. She convinced herself that made it safe. At 3:30, Luca's men exchanged vehicles with the willing diner driver. Elena went because she could identify cold storage residue, and Victor's men would overlook a florist in a diner coat. Luca remained in the rear of the van with his injured arm secured. His right hand held no weapon. A pistol rested beside him for his guard, Anthony Russo. Asena sat in front with Anthony driving. At 4:07, they turned onto River Road. Warehouse 3 stood dark behind a chain fence. The east loading door was already open. Elena saw no food carts, no guard smoking beneath the lamp, and no condensation rolling from the cold room exhaust. Every detail Rafe described was absent. "Do not enter," she said. The gate slammed behind them. Floodlights ignited. Bullets struck the van's engine block and front tires. Anthony dropped below the dashboard and reversed hard, but the damaged van slewed sideways. Luca pulled Elena through the partition before a round punched the passenger window. They escaped through the rear doors into a narrow service lane, while Moretti backup rammed the outer gate from the street. Victor had changed the visible routine and left the warehouse empty as a trap. Luca's men laid smoke from 2 emergency canisters and extracted them through a gap in the fence. No one was shot, but Anthony's shoulder struck the doorframe, and Luca's wound reopened when he dragged Elena behind concrete barriers with his right arm. Blood spread beneath the new dressing. They reached Faro at 4:46. Luca's physician cleaned and reclosed the wound, furious at both of them. Elena stood beside the packing table, wet and shaking after the danger had passed. "I treated a repeated schedule like a promise," she said. "Rafe warned us, so Victor knew we would know." Luca did not absolve her with a lie. "Yes." She looked at him sharply, "and I rushed because noon threatened my authority," he continued. "We both made the trap possible. Marco could be anywhere now then. We start with what Victor could not move." Nina returned from the hospital with Thomas' phone and a plastic evidence pouch. Thomas had remembered something while being examined. During his abduction, the Sarto men stopped at Marlowe Flowers. One entered the shop with a Municipal Inspector S copied key. The other remained in the van wrapping an object in cream Florist paper. Thomas had kicked the van wall until a loose strip of paper fell beneath the seat. Inside the pouch was a narrow, torn edge bearing half a wholesaler's purple stamp. Elena recognized the ink, Northfield Conservatory. Across the state line, she called its night manager. The manager initially refused to discuss customers, then confirmed after Elena described the quarantine that one private buyer had reserved the conservatory's entire blue iris crop before Monday. The buyer collected it Thursday afternoon in refrigerated Sarto trucks. "Destination?" Elena asked. "The paperwork says Mercer Mansion." "They were never there," Owen said over speaker. Elena looked at the yellow dust beside Victor's seal in her photograph. Northfield packed delicate stems with corn-based drying powder, pale gold under warm light. The forged order had been sealed near the missing flowers. Victor wrote or handled that page wherever he stored the irises. She said, "If we find the flowers, we find where the order was prepared. Maybe where Marco was moved." Nina turned Thomas' phone toward them. The delivery van's route application had logged its own movement during the abduction. After leaving River Warehouse 3 on Thursday, it stopped for 11 minutes at a disused Sarto-owned ice plant north of the Botanical Freight Terminal. Elena remembered the refrigerated trucks. An ice plant can keep irises fresh. Luca rose, slower this time, "We verify before we move." At 5:18, dawn beginning grey beyond the greenhouse glass. Victor sent Elena a photograph of Marco Sarto tied to a metal chair beside 12 buckets of blue irises. The message beneath it contained only a deadline, 8 m. Victor called 1 minute after sending the photograph. "You made an impressive bouquet," he told Elena. "Now make another. Come to the ice plant with Luca's signed surrender of Mercer Street. Or Marco dies and your driver is charged with transporting the weapon used in my attempted murder." Elena kept the phone on speaker. "You already lost the captains." 3 hesitated. 9 are waiting to see who survives breakfast. "Why the irises?" Victor laughed softly. "Because symbols are useful when people are too frightened to ask questions." The line ended. Victor wanted the corridor recognized before noon. Marco was leverage, the forged oath his mechanism, and Luca surrender his contingency. Luca dictated a surrender document to his attorney. It ceded Moretti's claim to Mercer Street and Bell Alley effective immediately. He signed with his right hand at 5:41. Elena watched the ink dry. "You re-giving him exactly what he wants. I'm buying Marco 3 hours. The council may treat this as final, even if we expose Victor. Then I lose Mercer, and the homes above it." Luca's eyes hardened. "I will protect them without owning the road." It was the cost she had needed to see. He was surrendering power without making her responsible for rewarding him. Helen Farrow confirmed the ice plant received freight through 1 South Bay. Nina reported the gasoline attack with neighbors' photographs. Carlo and Owen brought the divided captains close enough to witness the exchange. At 6:20, Rafe drove Elena and the surrender in a Faro truck. Luca followed with Anthony, his left arm immobilized. "You have learned to give orders quickly," he said. "You have learned to receive them slowly." Progress on both sides, the exchange almost became a smile. But his expression settled into familiar restraint. Elena reached across the seat and adjusted the edge of his sling where it pressed his neck tattoo. The touch was brief, neither pretended it was accidental. They reached the botanical freight terminal at 6:47. Before approaching the ice plant, Elena examined the loading records kept at the terminal gate. Northfield S truck had entered at 1:14 a.m. and exited at 1:39. The manifest listed 12 buckets, but the vehicle weight on exit was nearly 300 pounds heavier than on entry. "A passenger?" Anthony asked. "More than one? Or equipment?" Elena said. "Marco may not be in the plant anymore. Her warehouse failure changed her method. She checked the image instead of treating it as proof of current location." Condensation glazed the chair. But Marco's breath did not cloud. A wall clock showed 4:52. The 1:39 exit came before the photograph. The truck had entered with empty racks, departed heavier, and never returned in the terminal logs. "They moved the irises into the plant at 1:30, she said. The truck left carrying something else. Marco arrived later in another vehicle. Rafe knew a drainage entrance on the north side from his food deliveries. Anthony inspected it and found fresh tire tracks but no guards. Victor wanted them entering there. Elena walked the public edge of the property instead. The ice plant's main refrigeration vents faced east. A sweet green scent drifted from the exhaust-cut iris stems under stress. The flowers were still inside. A second exhaust vent remained warm and odorless. 2 cold rooms, she said. One running, one off. Luca understood. The photograph shows Marco in the cold room with the flowers. Victor turned on the refrigeration after taking it. He cannot leave Marco there for 3 hours without killing him accidentally. They watched the roof. Steam rose from a narrow pipe above the warm room. Someone was heating the interior. At 7:12, Elena entered the south loading bay alone, carrying the surrender document and a single white anemone. Victor stood on the packing floor with 6 armed men. Marco was alive behind an interior window in the warm room, bruised and bound but sitting upright. "The document first," Victor said. Elena held it where he could see Luca's signature. "Marco first," Victor gestured, and a guard opened the interior door. Marco was pulled onto the floor. The exchange should have been simple. Then Elena saw the 12 buckets behind Victor. The blue irises were not Northfielder's crop. Their petals had curled, and their stems bore the grey softness of flowers held too long. The fresh crop was missing. Victor had staged the photograph with discarded flowers. Somewhere else, 12 fresh arrangements were already traveling toward the captains, and whoever delivered them would carry Elena's forged consent. Elena let the white anemone fall from her hand. Through the loading bay window, Rafe saw the signal they had agreed upon. An empty hand meant the exchange had changed. Victor reached for the surrender. Elena released it only when Marco crossed half the distance between them. Then the south door rolled upward. Luca did not charge first. Carlo Dane and Owen Bell entered ahead of him with 4 Sarto captains, their weapons lowered but visible. Victor's guards looked from the captains to Marco and lost the certainty that had held them in place. "The document is signed," Luca said. "Mercer is no longer mine to bargain with. Release him." Victor seized the paper and backed toward the north exit. "You brought captains to an exchange. Your word is worthless." "They came for their heir," Elena said. "Not for you." Marco crossed the remaining distance. Anthony cut his restraints. Victor escaped through the north corridor with 2 loyal guards, taking the surrender and the original forged order from his coat pocket, long enough to display it before leaving. The other 4 guards stayed behind. They had seen Marco alive. Marco's voice was raw. "The fresh bouquets are going to St. Gabriel Hall. Victor plans to place them before the captains at 8:30, with Elena's order beneath them and Luca's surrender beside it. If 9 men touch the arrangements, the council will call it acceptance." It was 7:19. St. Gabriel was 26 minutes away in morning traffic. Elena looked at the wilted irises, then at the loading manifests. "Fresh flowers leave traces. We don't chase Victor. We chase the cold truck." 3 refrigerated vehicles had left the botanical district since dawn. The terminal clerk gave Elena their company colors and departure times because she had delivered flowers through his gate for 7 years. One was heading south to restaurants, one west to a hotel, and one east towards St. Gabriel Hall without a listed customer. Rafe drove. Elena sat beside him and called shop owners along the east route. A cafe owner on Grove Avenue, a cobbler near Mason Square, and the manager of the 24-hour grocery opposite St. Gabriel. These were not informants purchased by a mafia family. They were customers who knew Elena had delivered anniversaries, apologies, and hospital flowers in every kind of weather. Within 6 minutes, the cafe owner reported a white cold truck passing with water streaming from its rear seal. Refrigeration set too low, Elena said. They reinforcing field-warm irises to hold. Luca followed with Marco, Carlo, and Anthony. The physician had secured Luca's arm again and warned that another strain could require surgery. He remained in the rear sedan, furious at his physical limit but honoring it. The flower truck reached St. Gabriel at 8:03. Victor's men unloaded 12 matching arrangements through the kitchen entrance. Elena did not attempt to stop them on the street. The hall was neutral ground, and weapons inside would invalidate any council claim. She entered through the public doors carrying her mother's ledger. 9 captains stood around a long oak table. 3 arrangements from Elena's first bouquet had been placed at one end. Victor's 12 fresh blue iris displays filled the center. Beneath them lay the forged order and Luca's surrender. Victor faced the room in a charcoal suit, untouched by the night except for smoke at one cuff. Elena Marlowe has arrived to confirm her work. Every eye turned to her. She felt soot tighten on her skin and became aware of the borrowed coat over her smoke-stained green dress. Humiliation was part of Victor's design. He expected her ruined appearance to make his polished evidence seem more credible. "Those are not my arrangements," she said. Victor lifted the forged page. "Your handwriting, my seal. Your flowers. Your flowers." Elena approached the table, reserved from Northfield before the quarantine, packed in corn powder and carried in your refrigerated trucks. She removed one iris. Its cut end was blunt, bruised by a mechanical blade. Marlowe flowers cut every ceremonial stem by hand on a long diagonal, so it drank water during presentation. The binding wire was twisted clockwise. Elena and Nina always twisted left, a habit inherited from Elena's left-handed mother. Those details proved the bouquets were not hers, but Victor still held the stronger image. Her handwriting and his seal on one page. A florist defending her reputation. He said nothing more. Marco entered. The room changed around him. Men who had accepted Victor's story stared at the nephew he claimed had abandoned them. Marco did not make a speech. He placed both hands on the table so they could see the Sarto ring. Victor said had been returned months ago. "He held me beneath Warehouse 3, Marco said. He needed my assent to open Mercer. I refused. Victor's captains did not immediately defect. Marco's testimony established motive, not every act. Elena respected their hesitation. Loyalty built over decades should not collapse on command. Victor pushed the arrangements toward them. "Touch the flowers and end this." Rafe stepped from the doorway. He ordered us to burn her alive. Victor's head turned. "You carried her bouquet." "Yes." Rafe removed his Sarto pin and set it beside the white anemone. "That is why I started asking what else you made us carry." One by one. 6 younger soldiers behind him removed their pins. They did not join Luca. They moved to Marco's side. Victor had lost his street force, but he still possessed the original page and Luca's legal surrender. He gathered both and left before the captains could agree to detain him. Neutral rules protected departure from the hall. At 8:41, Nina called from Mercer Street. A demolition crew had arrived at Marlowe Flowers with an emergency order declaring the burned building unsafe. Victor had found another way to open the corridor before noon. Elena reached Mercer Street at 9:09. A yellow excavator waited beside the fire truck's barricades. 2 city contractors were attaching chains to her storefront while a supervisor held an emergency demolition authorization purchased by a Sarto-controlled property company. The authorization might eventually be overturned, but eventually would leave a pile of bricks and an open passage to Bell Alley. Victor no longer needed Elena to sell. He needed the building gone before the council reconvened. Nina stood on the sidewalk with Mrs. Alvarez, Helen Farrow, Toma's brother, and nearly 40 market residents. They had formed a quiet line between the machine and the shop. No one carried a weapon. The fire marshal has not released the structure, Nina told the supervisor. Demolition would destroy an active arson scene. That fact stopped the chains for 11 minutes, not forever. Victor had bribed the deputy inspector named on the authorization. The real fire marshal was across the city. Luca arrived but kept his guards half a block away if armed Moretti men entered the line. Victor could describe the crowd as a territorial occupation. Luca understood the trap without Elena explaining it. "I can remove the crew," he said quietly, "and give Victor his war. The building may come down." Elena looked through the blackened doorway. The shop was damaged, soaked, and loved. She wanted to chain herself to it. Instead, she asked what still mattered if the walls were lost. "The delivery records," she said. "My mother's older ledgers. The original envelope Victor left Thursday." Nina had moved the cream envelope into the rear office before the fire. Firefighters later recovered the cash box and several waterlogged files as part of the scene inventory. The envelope was now sealed inside an evidence bag in the Marshal S truck. Elena called the fire station captain whose crew had logged it. He arrived at 9:36, halted demolition formally, and opened the truck compartment in front of Elena, Luca, and the city supervisor. The cream envelope remained damp but intact. Its red wax seal matched the seal on Victor's forged order photograph. Inside was not merely the low purchase offer. A blue carbon transfer sheet had been folded behind the contract. Along its lower half, pressure marks formed fragments of the forged flower list the writer had placed Elena's blank order paper over the contract while practicing her hand. The capital M remained open at the top. Victor had carried the envelope into Elena's shop himself and left it there before the forged order arrived. The carbon sheet connected him to its creation without depending on Elena's opinion. Northfield's reservation and packing scrap connected him to the impossible flowers. Marco and Rafe connected the mechanism to the coercion and fire. 3 pieces, each with a separate origin. The city supervisor stepped away from the excavator. Him not destroying evidence. At 9:48, the crew shut down its engine. Victor watched from a sedan at the end of Mercer Street. When Elena raised the evidence bag, he understood what she had recovered. His car pulled away toward the river. Lucas' men could have followed. Elena stopped them. "He wants pursuit," she said. "He still has the original order and your surrender." "He'll go where those papers can become power," Marco answered. The noon council. The council had moved its session from St. Gabriel to the Sarto River packing house after the Neutral Hall incident. Victor controlled the exits there. He believed Luca could not enter without starting a blood feud. Luca looked at the market residents holding their line. "I surrendered Mercer. I have no territorial standing at the Sarto Council." Elena held the wet envelope against her coat. "But Marco does, and I own the evidence." Luca's gaze settled on her with restrained pride and something more dangerous. "Then this is your strategy. No weapons in the chamber. Marco enters as heir. The captains enter under their own oath. I present the flowers and records. You wait outside. Victor will have guards. So will the truth if his men decide it deserves them." Luca disliked every part of the plan that placed her beyond his reach. This time, he did not replace her choice with his fear. "I will wait outside," he said, "until you ask." Elena touched his uninjured hand. "That is the first order you followed quickly." At 11:53 a.m., Marco Sarto entered the river packing house, with Elena on his right and Carlo Dane on his left. 9 captains followed. Owen carried the first bouquet Elena had made. Rafe carried the evidence bag. The remaining Sarto soldiers lined the walls, uncertain whom they served. Victor sat at the head of the chamber beneath the old family crest. Luca's surrender and the forged floral order lay before him. 2 loyal guards controlled the side exits. Luca remained outside the vehicle gate with Anthony and his men, exactly as promised. The neutral council consisted of 3 aging heads of families who cared less about innocence than stability. Victor began with the simplest claim. Luca had surrendered Mercer. Elena had served as a covert messenger. Marco had returned only after conspiring with Moretti. Elena did not answer with a moral speech. She rebuilt the timeline on the table. She placed Victor S. 12 fresh irises beside the Northfield packing strip. She showed the blunt mechanical cuts and clockwise wire. Helen Farrow, attending as the wholesaler who had confirmed the quarantine, authenticated the purple Northfield stamp. The terminal clerk S signed gate copy, established the Sarto refrigerated truck S collection time. Then Elena removed the carbon sheet from Victor envelope. Under angled light, the pressure marks revealed the same flower sequence as the original page in Victor hand. "You practiced my writing on a contract you brought into my shop," she said. "You knew the flowers meant an oath, but you assigned every captain to yourself, my mother's ledger records, who actually sponsored them." Owen opened the ledger to page 87. The captains inspected their names. Victor's restraint cracked only at the edges. A damaged carbon sheet proves nothing about Marco. Marco rolled up his right sleeve, showing the abrasion left by months of restraint. "Then ask the men who fed me." Rafe named the warehouse shifts. 2 wall guards looked down. One admitted delivering meals. The other confirmed Victor ordered Marco moved before the council whenever neutral inspectors approached. Victor seized the original order and moved toward a metal waste burner at the chamber's side. Elena anticipated destruction, not because she knew his mind, but because he had burned her shop when he could not control its records. She overturned a bucket of flower water across the burner's fuel tray. The flame died with a hiss. Victor's loyal guard grabbed her arm. Elena did not transform into a fighter. She twisted toward the grip to protect her shoulder and drove the heavy ledger onto his instep. Carlo pulled him away. Marco blocked the second guard. Victor drew a pistol from beneath the table and aimed at Marco. Every captain had to choose. Rafe stepped between them first, then Owen, then Carlo. Within seconds, Victor faced a wall made from his own men, each weapon lowered, but each body refusing him a clear shot. "Move," Victor ordered. No one moved. Elena's first bouquet sat at the center of the table. The sponsor's flowers no longer functioned as a code. They were a reminder that loyalty had rules older than fear. Victor turned the gun toward Elena. Luca appeared in the open doorway, but did not fire. With one usable hand and civilians behind Victor, a shot would have been reckless. He stopped where Elena could see him and trusted the captains already within reach. Carlo disarmed Victor. Marco removed the amber signet ring from his uncle's hand and placed it before the council. "I do not ask to inherit his methods," Marco said. "I ask the captains to reject a route built through homes and enforced by burning a neutral woman alive." The vote was not dramatic. It was decisive. 10 captains recognized Marco's claim. 2 abstained. None supported Victor. The council voided the Sarto claim to Mercer because it had been obtained through coercion. Luca's surrender remained valid. He did not regain the territory. Instead, the corridor returned to neutral old market control, with commercial access governed by its owners outside. The fire marshal and city detectives waited on the arson evidence already reported hours earlier. Marco surrendered Victor to them with the gasoline photographs, contractor testimony, and the original forged order. The criminal case would take time. Victor's power ended before the handcuffs closed because his own men had already withdrawn it. At 12:31 p.m., Elena walked out of the packing house. Luca stood beside his car, his injured arm in its sling. "You did not ask me to come in. You came anyway, only to the doorway." "Progress," she said. He looked at the soot still caught in her hair. "You saved my enemy, cost me a territory, and dismantled a Don with a bouquet. Are you complaining?" "I am trying to understand what kind of flowers are appropriate." For the first time that day, Elena laughed. Victor was charged with arson, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and conspiracy tied to the forged demolition order. The case rested on the photographs, carbon sheet, purchase records, and separate witnesses, not a confession. Marco took temporary leadership of the Sarto family under conditions negotiated with the captains. He closed the weapons route through residential streets and released anyone bound only by Victor's personal debts. He and Luca remained rivals, but they signed a narrow peace protecting the old market from family operations. Luca did not recover Mercer. His signature had been freely given. Losing the corridor weakened his income and angered two Moretti elders, consequences he accepted. Marlowe Flowers remained closed for 9 weeks. The front room required new wiring, glass, plaster, and flooring. Elena's insurance challenged the claim until the arson charge was filed. But the market did not wait. Mrs. Alvarez fed the repair crew. Helen Farrow supplied a temporary cooler. Thomas, recovered from his concussion, organized deliveries from a borrowed food truck. Nina ran orders from a folding table inside the bakery. Elena made one boundary clear. Luca could provide security on public streets, but he could not pay for the rebuilding or place Moretti men inside her business. He respected it. His contribution was less grand, and therefore harder for him. He arrived when invited, carried debris with his healed right arm, listened when contractors spoke, and left when Elena said the day was over. His left arm regained strength gradually. He followed medical restrictions, though Elena caught him once attempting to lift a stone planter too soon. "Put it down," she said. "It is not heavy. Neither is arrogance until you carry it for 32 years. He put it down. Their attraction did not become forgiveness, because no single apology could repair the instincts that had endangered them. Luca had to learn that protecting Elena meant respecting decisions he disliked. Elena had to learn that accepting help did not always surrender independence. They argued through both lessons. On the Thursday morning the shop reopened. Lemon leaves once again framed the awning. The new front window reflected a clean autumn sky. Elena wore a burgundy wrap dress beneath a fresh canvas apron. Her chestnut curls pinned high. Nina filled the cooler. Thomas loaded the first clinic delivery. Customers crowded the sidewalk before 9. They bought flowers they did not need, because the shop itself had become a promise the neighborhood intended to keep. Luca arrived, without guards, at 9:17. A tailored black coat covered most of his tattoos. Though ink remained visible above his collar and across his hands, he placed 6 white camellias on the counter. Elena examined them. "You bought flowers somewhere else and brought them into my shop." Helen Farrow said they were worthy. "Helen enjoys creating trouble." She also said, "You would make me work for forgiveness." Elena looked up. "Forgiveness for what?" "For thinking I could arrange your life as easily as a territory map." The answer contained no defense. That mattered more than polish. He reached into his coat and produced a small clay pot holding a young camellia plant. No jewels, contract, property key, or extravagant debt hid beneath it. "Aunt Sophia wants to grow her own," he said. "She asked whether you would teach us." "Us?" "I was told patience is required. Then you need the lesson more than she does." Luca's stern expression remained, but warmth entered his eyes. "Will you come to dinner afterward?" Elena could have made him wait longer. She also knew delay was not the same as freedom. Choice meant saying yes when she wanted to, not only proving she could say no dinner. She agreed. No council business. No armed driver at the table. And if your aunt asks, you were the one who nearly killed the planter. Those terms are severe. You may appeal to the florist. He offered his uninjured hand across the counter. Elena ignored it, walked around, and adjusted his coat collar where it folded over the ink on his neck. His breathing changed. But he did not reach for her until she rested one palm against his chest. The kiss was quiet, deliberate, and chosen in the middle of her crowded shop. Nina turned toward the cooler with suspicious speed. Thomas carried an empty box outside while grinning at the wall. When Elena stepped back, Luca's face was still controlled. Only his eyes revealed how thoroughly she had unsettled him. "The camellias need water," she said. "Tell me what to do." She handed him a clean bucket. Outside, delivery vans crossed the yard behind Marlowe Flowers under rules written by the people who lived there. No mafia family owned the passage. No burned doorway remained open for someone else's power. Luca filled the bucket at the work sink while Elena arranged 6 white camellias beneath the morning light. The first bouquet she had sent him preserved his life. The second had turned frightened soldiers toward the truth. This one promised nothing grander than another Thursday. For both of them, that was enough.